So the TV viewership numbers from HBO's triple header last Saturday are starting to come in. And of course, this was the Ukrainian Invasion, the two Alexanders, Vojtik and Usyk. And in the main event, it was Vasyl Lomachenko. And the numbers overall, I think, are respectable. I think they're pretty good, but there's some good and some bad. And I wanted to give my viewpoints on this, the good, the bad, the ugly, and share some of my concerns, because some of the things that jumped out to me when I was reading the press releases and kind of the high-fiving going on and everything like that was, you know, man, just 2-3 years ago, this rating would have been seen as a disappointment. And now it's the highest rated premium cable boxing broadcast so far of 2017. And that is concerning. Look, a lot of you guys out there obsess over pay-per-view buys and purse splits and how much this fighter's making versus that fighter and how they're getting their deals done. All that stuff really doesn't matter at the end of the day. It doesn't really promote the sport or push it forward or promote it in any way. It's just, that's just deals being made and negotiations happening between fighters. But TV ratings matter, particularly when it comes to the premium cable networks. And that's HBO and Showtime, obviously, here in the United States, because they're paying for the rights to air these fights. Basically, HBO and Showtime are buying these cards to have the right to air these cards. So if they're not getting the viewership return on their investment, there's no reason to make future investments. Now, of course, the PBC, the Premier Boxing Champion situation with the time buys, that's a little different. And that's a whole different perspective. TV numbers matter for them because they're trying to get a future investment way, way down the line. Maybe some sort of deal with a network or a group of networks. But that's another rant for another time. This is specific to the premium cable, the views so far this year. And let me talk real quickly just about the actual numbers, okay? So the main event, Lomachenko-Sosa, peaked at 886,000 viewers. It averaged 832,000. The co-main with Vojtik and his big KO win over Gonzalez, that averaged 690,000 viewers. It peaked over 700,000. And the TV opener between Usyk and Michael Hunter averaged 679,000, peaked at 774,000. So one thing I find interesting about these numbers, okay, generally speaking with these triple header cards, or when you see 2, 3, even 4 fights on a card like this, and you look at the viewership, the viewership progresses and peaks during the main event, as this did. But you look at the average, the whole card itself averaged, I think, over 750,000, and the peak was at 886,000. So beginning, middle, and end were all pretty close together, within the same range, right? Now, we've seen other ratings recently with these big cards, whether it be on premium cable or regular network TV, where the TV opener had maybe half of the average viewership as the main event. And what that tells you is that as the card is playing out and you're getting closer and closer to the main event, more casual fans are tuning in. When you see the viewership kind of stay in the same range, right? You still get that peak during the main event. That's totally natural. That's always going to happen. But when it stays in the same range as this did, it was all within a 100 to 200,000 viewers, the whole card. That tells you it's basically diehards watching. It's diehard fight freaks tuning in. And it should be stated that this card was going up head-to-head against the UFC card. And then, of course, the NBA and NHL seasons are winding down. The Major League Baseball season's winding up. So in different markets throughout the United States, you had different sports going on in, you know, those regional markets, depending on what league was playing that night, whatever. So there was plenty of head-to-head competition for this card. It is 3 Ukrainian guys, only one of whom is just starting to get buzz among boxing casuals, that being Lomachenko, obviously. All things being considered, I think it's safe to say that diehard fight freaks were tuning in, right? All that being said, good, respectable rating. But, man, you just compare this to some other ratings that we've had in recent years, it's somewhat of a disappointment. Now, before I go into some ratings from 2016, 2015, I also want to talk real quickly about other 2017 ratings. Now, before this broadcast, HBO's best fight so far this year in 2017 as far as ratings was the Lemieux-Stevens fight, which I think peaked at 672,000 viewers. And you think about that, again, it's pretty much only diehards tuning in. David Lemieux has been on American TV before. He fought Gennady Golovkin back in 2015. He's been in a few other undercards. He was on a Canelo undercard. So he's not exactly a name, but he's not exactly a no-name. And the style matchup between Lemieux and Stevens, you would think that the hype that kind of had among at least boxing diehards who were telling their casual fan friends about that kind of a fight, that it would have did a better rating, man. 672,000. The highest rated fight so far for Showtime this year was when Adrian Broner fought Adrian Granados. That peaked at 859,000. So you compare Showtime to HBO, and a lot of you will say, well, look, HBO just outdid Showtime's best card, but you have to remember, HBO is in millions more homes than Showtime. So when you adjust for, per capita percentage, Showtime's viewership, and I could go on several of these cards, so I just won't bore you with all that, but their viewership per capita is higher than HBO's. And I think that this is just further evidence that the brand at HBO Boxing, is in trouble. And I don't think we can deny it anymore. There's talk about, their budget being slashed and the merger situation happening with their parent company and all this. I just see a lack of vision. And I don't know what their business motto is anymore. I don't know what they're building toward in the future. And I know one thing's for sure, they're not servicing their damn fans. You compare that to Showtime Boxing. Again, per capita, they're doing a higher rating, but also they're doing more boxing programming, period. They haven't had a pay-per-view show yet this year, right? They're doing shows on regular, quote-unquote, Showtime, and they've had some Showtime Boxing on CBS, which, they're all owned by the same parent company, obviously, so they can work those deals really easy. But they're doing more boxing programming, so collectively, their ratings are destroying HBO. And then again, you adjust per capita, they're still beating HBO. For a Broner Granados card to be outperforming per capita, really destroying anything HBO's put up so far this year, man, that says a lot. And that's scary for HBO. We don't have to go very far back to see higher ratings than this, guys. Just last year, when Andre Ward fought Sullivan Barrera, that did over 1 million. That did over 1 million views. When Sergey Kovalev had his rematch with Jean Pascal, that did over 1.1 million, right? His first fight with Pascal back in 2015 did over 1.1 million. Klitschko Jennings back in 2015 did 1.6 million. Matisse Provodnikov 2015, that did 1.2 million. Alvarado and Rios, I think it was their rubber match, that did 1.2 million. Golovkin against Martin Murray, 862,000. Canelo Kirkland, and all these are 2015. Canelo Kirkland, over 2.1 million. Golovkin Monroe, 1.3 million. Miguel Cotto against Daniel Gill, that did almost 1.6 million. These are all in 2015. Bradley Vargas did over almost 1.2 million. Sergey Kovalev against Najib Mohammadi. That was a crazy mismatch, right? I think it was a mandatory fight. He had to fight him. But that was a crazy mismatch. That did over 1 million views. Even when Timothy Bradley fought Brandon Rios, that did over 900,000. Terrence Crawford against Thierry Jean did over 1 million. Last year in 2016, Terrence Crawford against Hank Lundy did just under 1 million. I could keep going here. Here's the theme, though. A lot of these names, especially those names from 2015 that did well over 1 million views, none of them have fought on regular HBO yet this year, and they're not scheduled to. The only one is Terrence Crawford, who has a fight coming up, obviously, later this year. It's going to be on regular HBO. And now Miguel Cotto is apparently going to fight in June, probably against Yoshihiro Kamagai. But he hasn't fought in a year and a half, going on 2 years. So what kind of rating will that do? I don't know if it's going to do a very good rating. But Andre Ward, Sergey Kovalev, they're going to fight again, but it's going to be on pay-per-view. Gennady Golovkin just fought on pay-per-view. Canelo Alvarez, pay-per-view. Even Roman Gonzalez, who did some solid ratings last year for HBO, pay-per-view. He was on that Golovkin-Jacobs undercard, right? I could keep going with this. That's the pattern here, okay? And I don't know what the answer is. I don't know how they can fix this other than doing more boxing programming and putting more fights on regular HBO. Just came out this week that Gennady Golovkin will not be fighting in June. Definitely not fighting in June. Definitely not fighting Billy Joe Saunders. They're probably holding out for that September fight with Canelo Alvarez, should he beat Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. on May 6th. And there's no guarantee in that. There's also no guarantee that Canelo, should he win, not suffer some kind of injury. So that summer fight that HBO is banking on, having Golovkin on, who always does over 1 million, even if it's a delayed broadcast or a foreign broadcast, right? When he fought Kell Brook last year, the live fight almost did 1 million. I think it did like 800,000. But then the replay almost did that much as well. Collectively, it did well over 1 million views, right? And I talked about when he fought Willie Monroe, that did 1.3 million views, man. 1.3 million against Willie Monroe. They really could have used that Golovkin Billy Joe Saunders fight in June. That would have been huge for HBO. Gone. Canelo Alvarez ain't fighting till May, right? May 6th, as I talked about. Even if he scores a first-round knockout, he ain't fighting again till September. He's a 2-fight-a-year guy now, pay-per-view. Pretty much, it looks like that's what Golovkin's going to become from here on out. Andre Ward and Sergey Kovalev, the winner of their rematch, they're a once or twice-a-year pay-per-view guy. Who the fuck is left? Manny Pacquiao's coming back, I think July 1st against Jeff Horn. Now, maybe cooler heads will prevail, and HBO will find a way to put that fight on regular HBO. It is a foreign broadcast. It's happening over in Brisbane, Australia. So, even though that isn't a very high-profile fight, it's a mandatory fight for Pacquiao. Nobody really is excited for it outside of Australia, but it's still Manny Pacquiao. If somehow HBO can figure out a way to put that on regular HBO, and it should be much, much cheaper than if that fight were to happen in America because the foreign license fees are much, much lower. Even if it's one of these things where they air it in the middle of the day and then do a rebroadcast later that night and they have to do a combined rating, the way they've done in recent years with like Klitschko Fury, I talked about Golovkin Brook and several other cards, right? That could help them out. But I don't know, man. I don't know. I do wonder. We've talked a lot about the pay-per-view numbers declining, and there's a lot of debate as to what's causing that. Is it the Mayweather-Pacquiao effect? Is it the cord cutting? Is it these streaming services? How much are these streaming services and the cord cutting affecting regular premium cable ratings? That's something we don't talk about. Is the cord cutting nature, is Facebook Live, Periscope, these other services, is that also affecting just regular HBO ratings, regular Showtime ratings? And if it is, okay, how is Showtime Boxing still doing ratings close to, in some cases better than the ratings they were doing 2 or 3 years ago, while HBO's ratings are down 20, 30% relative to what they were doing a couple years ago? Guys, I'm not talking about 10 years ago. I'm not talking about Oscar de la Hoya's era or anything like that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just here in the last few years. We've seen a shift at HBO Boxing. I do think a lot of it's politically driven. I think there's agendas going on. I think the executives at that network don't give a shit about boxing. I think Peter Nelson does. I think the people directly involved in the sports programming department there care about boxing. But their bosses and their bosses' bosses, I don't think they give a shit. I think Showtime Boxing and their brass up at the top, I do think they care. I think that's obvious. You've seen Showtime do innovations recently. The stuff they're doing on social media has been awesome. They've picked up a lot of foreign fights. They just picked up that Linares Crolla card from London, right? They're doing more of that kind of stuff. They're airing undercards. And I'm not saying 1 or 2 undercard fights. They're airing 3, 4, 5 undercard fights sometimes on their other Showtime networks. I think Showtime Extreme and stuff like that. They are doing things to show, not only service their subscribers who subscribe to them for boxing, but show that they have a long-term business plan in the sport of boxing. And they also don't have exclusive deals with fighters. They do have exclusive deals with fighter advisors, and that might bite them in the butt depending on what happens. But the advisor they work with right now represents almost 200 fighters. And they've bought into the UK market, which is the hotbed of boxing right now. They've been working with Eddie Hearn a lot, and Eddie Hearn is the best promoter in the business right now, right? And they've linked on to him a few times. So they're making moves and adjusting things toward the future of this business, for the 21st century of this business. I'm not seeing that at HBO. What I'm seeing the last year or so there is they're still stuck in that pay-per-view model that Floyd Mayweather and, to a degree, Manny Pacquiao blew up. That model's done. That is the 20th century, and we're in the 21st century. Showtime's making adjustments. HBO's not. So I want to know what you guys think about this. What am I missing? Am I hitting too hard on this stuff? Am I taking it too seriously? I'm not trying to talk like the sky is falling. But this stuff matters, man. HBO has been the gold standard of boxing in the USA for decades. And to see them getting beat out by other networks, that wasn't happening years ago. And it's happening now. And it's not because they don't have the fighters. Look at the fighters Showtime has. And look at the fighters HBO has. Take pay-per-view away. I'm just talking fighters to fighters, roster to roster. HBO has the better fighters. They have the majority of the fighters in the pound-for-pound list, but those guys aren't fighting on the damn network. They're not fighting often enough, and it's killing them in the ratings department. And the brass at the very top of that network that don't give a damn about boxing, they're bottom line people. And that network, HBO, is becoming more of a political propaganda network. It's becoming an offshoot of MSNBC more than an entertainment network. They're more concerned with the almighty dollar. And if they're paying X amount of dollars for a card and they're only getting this much back in terms of ratings, they're going to stop buying more cards. So this stuff should matter. What can we do to fix it?